The air in the motel room was heavy, as if the walls themselves were breathing. She woke to the sound of footsteps in the hallway, slow, deliberate, dragging against the thin carpet. But when she peered through the peephole, the corridor was empty, except for a single shadow stretching toward her door. Then, the handle began to turn. No knock, no voice, just the quiet rattle of someone trying to get inside. And in that moment, she realized she hadn't told anyone where she was staying. She hadn't planned on stopping. The motel appeared on the roadside like a half-forgotten memory, its faded neon sign flickering weakly against the dusk. She'd been driving for hours, her eyes heavy, the radio nothing but static in stretches of dead air. The glowing word vacancy seemed almost too eager, like bait cast into a dark river. Inside, the lobby smelled of mildew masked with lemon cleaner, an odd mixture that clung to the air. A man at the desk barely looked up, his eyes following her just long enough to make her feel noticed, then forgotten again. The key he handed over wasn't a card, but a heavy brass number on a worn ring. Room 6. The kind of detail that shouldn't matter, but settled in her mind like grit. The hallway stretched longer than it should have. Carpet worn thin, wallpaper peeling in strange, uneven strips. Every door she passed looked identical, yet she felt each one was watching, waiting. By the time she reached her room, her shoulders were tight, her chest heavy with that strange tension that comes before a storm. Inside, the room was simple. A bed too stiff, a lamp that buzzed faintly when lit, curtains that didn't quite close. It was ordinary enough to seem safe, yet something about the silence pressed in. She set her bag down and tried to shake it off, telling herself she was just tired. But then she noticed it, etched faintly into the wood of the nightstand. A single word, carved by someone's hand, almost hidden by time. Daunt. And though she couldn't explain why, her eyes kept drifting back to it, as if it was waiting for her to understand. The first few hours passed in uneasy quiet. She lay on the stiff mattress, listening to the faint hum of the buzzing lamp, telling herself that the strange word carved into the nightstand meant nothing. Don't. Just some bored traveler's graffiti, she thought. Nothing more. But silence has a way of sharpening the smallest sounds. The ticking of the old clock above the television grew louder, more insistent, until it felt like each second was echoing against the walls. She tried turning on the TV to drown it out, but the screen flashed with static. No channels, just shifting black and white snow. When she switched it off, she swore she heard something beyond the walls. Not voices. Not exactly. A sound like someone dragging a chair slowly across the floor. It came from the room next door, then stopped so suddenly it was as though it had been cut off mid-motion. She told herself it was normal, people move furniture, people make noise. But as she pressed her ear against the thin wall, she realized she couldn't hear anything else. No murmured conversations, no TV, no footsteps in the hallway. The motel was full of cars when she pulled in, but it felt as if she was the only one alive inside. Hours passed. Sleep never came. Every time she closed her eyes, some faint disturbance yanked her back awake, the creak of the floorboard near the window, the slow twist of the doorknob, just once, but enough to make her heart lurch, or the faint, rhythmic tapping that seemed to come from beneath the bed. She tried to rationalize it all. Old buildings make noises. Pipes rattle. Wood settles. Yet each sound carried a strange intention, like someone, or something, was trying to test her patience, to see how long she would stay. At 2:13 a.m., the lamp flickered and went out. Not the overhead bulb, not the TV, just the single lamp at the bedside, the one that hummed faintly like a warning. She sat in the dark, clutching her phone for light, but the battery was nearly dead. She checked the hallway outside, every light there still burned steadily, except the one directly in front of her door. It glowed faintly, then dimmed, then brightened again, like it was breathing. That's when she noticed the smell. It seeped into the room slowly, sour and metallic, like rust or old blood. She pulled back the curtains, thinking maybe it was drifting in from outside, but the parking lot was empty, swallowed in shadow. The smell grew stronger near the bathroom. When she opened the door, her throat tightened. The sink was bone dry, the tub immaculate, but the drain gave off a damp chill, and with it, that stench. It was as if something had been poured through it, something that didn't belong. She backed away and shut the door, but the stench clung to her nostrils, burrowing deep, as if it wanted to remind her it was still there. The clock ticked louder. 2:29 a.m. Her chest ached with dread. She sat at the edge of the bed, watching the sliver of hallway light beneath her door, willing it to stay steady. That was when the scratching began. At first, it was faint, like fingernails dragging lightly against wood. Then it grew sharper, more deliberate. It wasn't coming from her side of the door. It was coming from the hallway, someone scratching their way down the row of rooms, slow, steady, closer. She held her breath, heart slamming against her ribs, as the sound reached her door. Then, silence. She crept toward the peephole, her hands trembling, pressing her eye against the glass. At first, she saw nothing. The hallway stretched out, empty. But then she noticed it, the faint curve of a shadow, pressed right against her door. Too close to see clearly. Too still to be human. She stumbled back, covering her mouth, forcing herself not to scream. The scratching never returned, but she knew whatever it was had not gone. It was waiting. Minutes dragged into an eternity. She sat with her back against the wall, clutching her dead phone, staring at the door as though her will alone could hold it shut. Then came a sound that broke her completely, the soft click of a key sliding into the lock. The knob turned. Once, twice. It rattled, testing. Her breath caught as she pushed her weight against the door, praying the latch would hold. The handle twisted hard, then stilled. For a long moment, nothing. And then, footsteps. Slow, dragging, retreating down the hall. But they didn't fade. They circled. She could hear them above her, impossibly heavy steps moving across the ceiling, pacing back and forth. She pressed her palms against her ears, but the sound was inside her bones, vibrating through the thin walls, making her teeth ache. When it stopped, the silence was worse. She tried to tell herself to leave. To grab her bag, run to her car, and drive until the sun rose. But when she reached for her keys, she realized they weren't on the nightstand where she had left them. The brass room key sat there, heavy and cold. But her car keys, gone. Her pulse pounded in her ears as she dropped to her knees, checking beneath the bed. Empty. She yanked open drawers. Nothing. The keys had vanished. And then she saw it. Carved into the other nightstand, faint but unmistakable. A second word, etched into the wood by some desperate hand. Stay. Her chest tightened, her mind whirling. First, don't. Now stay. Warnings or commands, she couldn't tell. All she knew was that she was no longer alone. From the bathroom, the sound of dripping water began. But the pipes hadn't worked since she arrived. The dripping grew louder, a steady rhythm echoing through the bathroom door. She stood frozen, every muscle straining, as the sound became impossible to ignore. It wasn't the soft patter of water, it was heavier, thicker, like something viscous hitting porcelain. Her breath quickened as she reached for the doorknob. The metal was ice cold beneath her fingers, colder than it should have been, as though the room beyond had been waiting. She pushed it open slowly, the hinges moaning in protest. The bathroom was dark. The single bulb above the mirror flickered weakly, casting fractured light across cracked tiles. The sink was bone dry. The tub was spotless. But the sound came from the drain. Thick droplets, dark against the white porcelain, rising from below instead of falling into it. Her stomach twisted. It wasn't water. The smell hit her next, sickly, metallic, unmistakable. Blood. Something below the motel, beneath the concrete and pipes, was pushing it upward, as if the building itself was bleeding. She staggered back, but the drain gurgled violently, and the light snapped out, plunging her into darkness. She scrambled out, slamming the bathroom door, her pulse hammering so hard she thought her chest would split open. In the dark of the bedroom, the shadows shifted. Not from her. Not from any movement she could explain. They stretched unnaturally along the walls, too long, bending and curling like fingers reaching for her. The carved words glared at her now. Don't. Stay. Conflicting commands, like voices arguing over her fate. She wanted to run, but where? Her keys were gone, her phone dead, the hall outside crawling with a presence she couldn't see. Then came the whisper. Not outside the door. Inside the room. A low, guttural voice that seemed to crawl out of the cracks in the wallpaper, surrounding her, pressing against her skull. She couldn't make out the words at first, just the rhythm, like breath dragged over broken glass. But as it grew clearer, she realized it wasn't one voice. It was many. Layered, fractured, whispering in unison. They were saying her name. She pressed her hands over her ears, screaming, but the sound was inside her head. She stumbled back against the wall, but the wallpaper bubbled beneath her palms, pulsing like skin over something alive. She recoiled, and in that moment, she saw it. The mirror above the dresser. Her reflection wasn't alone. Behind her, in the glass, figures stood in the corners of the room. Dozens of them, pale and gaunt, eyes hollow, mouths open as though mid-scream. Their outlines wavered, blurred, but their faces were sharp, grotesque masks of agony. She spun around, but the room was empty. The shadows stretched long, but no bodies stood within them. Yet in the mirror, they leaned closer. One by one, they pressed their hands against the glass, palms smeared with something dark, clawing to break through. Cracks spiderwebbed across the surface, splintering her reflection. She backed away, but there was nowhere left to go. The voices surged, overlapping, drowning her thoughts. She dropped to her knees, clutching her head, begging silently for it to stop. And then, through the chaos, a single word cut through, sharp and clear. Leave. The lamp flared to life, flooding the room with blinding light. For a split second, everything was still. Silent. The mirror stood whole again. The whispers are gone. The shadows frozen. She scrambled to her feet, heart racing. The message was clear, whatever had toyed with her, whatever bled through the walls of this place, it wanted her gone. She didn't need telling twice. She yanked open the door to the hallway, clutching the brass key like a weapon. The corridor stretched out, empty and endless, the buzzing fluorescent lights overhead flickering in sequence, one after another, as though guiding her. She ran, shoes pounding the threadbare carpet, every nerve screaming at her to move faster. But the hallway didn't end. No matter how far she sprinted, the same doors, the same wallpaper, the same flickering lights repeated. Room 4. Room 5. Room 6. Again and again. She stopped, gasping, sweat slicking her palms. Her room key felt heavier now, almost burning in her hand. She turned in desperation, and there it was. Room 6. Her room. She had never left. Her breath hitched. The hallway around her groaned, the walls bending inward like the motel itself was breathing, drawing her back. She stumbled forward, but the floor tilted beneath her feet, pulling her toward the door. The brass number glinted, waiting. The handle turned on its own. The door creaked open. Inside, the room was no longer hers. The bed was unmade, sheets soaked in dark stains. The carpet squelched underfoot, saturated with something she refused to name. And on the walls, carved deep into the wood and plaster, were words stacked over each other in frantic scrawl. Don't. Stay. Run. Forever. Her vision blurred, her body trembling violently. Something moved in the corner. Not a shadow. Not a trick of light. A figure. It crawled from the darkness on all fours, limbs too long, joints bending wrong. Its skin was stretched thin, its face a mask of gaping hollows where eyes should be. It lurched forward with jerky, unnatural motions, dragging itself closer. She tried to run, but her legs buckled, locking beneath her. The air grew thick, pressing her down, suffocating her. The whispers returned, deafening now, pouring from the figure's hollow mouth in 1,000 voices at once. She clawed at the carpet, trying to drag herself away, but the figure was faster. Its hand shot out, skeletal fingers wrapping around her ankle, ice cold, pulling her back toward the bed. She screamed, kicking, thrashing, but its grip was unbreakable. The shadows swarmed, rising from the floor, wrapping around her arms and throat, holding her down. She gasped for breath as the figure loomed over her, its face lowering until the hollow voids where eyes should be were inches from hers. And then, in that endless void, she saw them. The missing guests. Dozens of faces, screaming silently in the dark, their mouths stretched wide in eternal horror. They weren't gone. They were inside it. Trapped. Watching. The figure leaned closer, its breath rancid, its whispers filling her skull until she thought her mind would shatter. And then, just before the darkness swallowed her whole, it spoke in a single, human voice, low, familiar, dripping with malice. It said her name. And then it said one more word. Stay. When the screaming stopped, she woke to silence. The room was empty. No figure. No shadows pressing against her skin. Just the stale air of a motel room at dawn, pale light leaking weakly through the curtains. For a moment, she thought it had been a dream. A fevered nightmare birthed from exhaustion and nerves. But then she looked at the nightstand. The words were gone. No carving. No scratches in the wood. Just a smooth, polished surface, as if nothing had ever been there. Her heart pounded as she scrambled to the mirror, half expecting the pale faces to return. But the reflection showed only her, disheveled, trembling, eyes red and swollen from tears she couldn't remember shedding. Her phone lay on the bed. Charged. She didn't remember plugging it in. Her car keys sat neatly beside it, as though they had been waiting all along. Every detail whispered a question she didn't dare ask: had it even happened? She fled. The parking lot was deserted, the rows of cars from the night before gone as though erased. Only her vehicle remained, frost lining its windows. The neon sign buzzed faintly in the morning haze, the word vacancy glowing bright and cheerful, like the night had never existed. She drove. Miles unspooled beneath her tires, the motel vanishing behind a curtain of trees. She didn't look back. She couldn't. Every time she blinked, she saw those hollow eyes hovering just beyond the glass, waiting for her to notice them again. Days passed, then weeks. She tried to tell herself it was over. That she had escaped. But her life became a series of fractures, shadows where none should be, whispers slipping into the corners of quiet rooms, the faint scent of blood rising from bathroom drains when no one else noticed. Sleep abandoned her. Every night, she dreamed of the motel hallway, endless, looping, each door bearing the brass number 6. Sometimes she ran. Sometimes she entered. Each time, the figure was waiting. Its hand stretching, its whisper threading through her mind, stay. She moved apartments. Changed jobs. Drove until she no longer recognized the landscape outside her windows. But the dreams followed. The shadows stretched longer. The mirrors cracked, though no one else could see the fractures. She began to notice others, too. Strangers in coffee shops, commuters on buses, people passing by on sidewalks. Their faces blurred for an instant, hollowed out, mouths wide in silent screams. Like the ones in the mirror that night. They flickered back to normal, leaving her gasping, clutching her chest, wondering if she was unraveling or if they were already claimed. Her friends stopped calling. The family stopped visiting. They said she wasn't herself anymore, that her eyes wandered to places no one else could see. That she mumbled in her sleep, repeating the same word over and over again. Stay. And then came the final confirmation. One evening, she returned home to find her apartment door ajar. She froze, keys clutched tight, every nerve alive with dread. Inside, the air was still. Do you feel it too, that weight in the room with you, even now? The shadows that never seem quite still, the whispers you're not sure belong to your own thoughts. If you've wandered this far with me, if you've listened to every word, then perhaps you already know, stories don't just end. They linger. They follow. So before the silence deepens, before the lights flicker one last time, like this tale if it chilled you. Share it, so the warning spreads. And subscribe, so you don't face the next nightmare alone. Because the next story waits just beyond the glass of your screen. And when it comes, it will already know your name.